question of towing the line of reality and then just kind of just jumps past it, flies past that line. Hello my loves, and thank you for joining me. It's Kirsten, and as you would have seen from the thumbnail, we have a massive stack of books to talk about in today's video, which is all about the weird books for weird people. I have 16 books to talk about, and then I have a few that are on my TBR that I would like to get to soon that I think is going to give those weird feelings. And when it comes to what is a weird book, I'm just going to let the books talk for themselves, so let's just get straight into this. Of course, I'm going to start off this video with Bunny by Mona Allward. Now this is kind of like the staple of weird books for me. This was my first proper introduction into the weird genre. I didn't like this one. When I first read this, I DNF'd it. I got a certain percentage through and I was just like, what the hell am I reading? This author must have been high. Like, what is going on? And then I decided to reread it, and that was back in August 2022. I was buddy reading it with a friend at work and I fell in love with it, and I then did start a reread where I was starting to annotate more heavily and using tabs and everything. I definitely want to get back to that. I started that, I think it was last year, but it got kind of put off to one side. I really want to get back to that though. What is it? Well, if you haven't heard of Bunny, I would be quite surprised. It's a very popular, Mona Allward is just a popular author in general for her weird and unusual books. But this one, we have like this cult basically going on at this school. We're in this prestigious school. It works for the dark academia genre, and we've got our main character Samantha, who feels like she is an outsider in this writing course. There is these group of 4 girls within her writing course that are all together, and they're very cliquey and they call each other Bunny, and it's like, oh, how are you, Bunny? I'm so good, Bunny, thank you. How I've missed you so much, Bunny. Like, it's really weird behaviour, and she's always made fun of them with her one best friend, and they've always just kind of laughed them off. However, she gets invited to their tea party, and that's when things start to change. She starts getting drawn into this really unusual world that's going on, and this book really is mind-bending and twisty, and I loved the end of it and the way that put a whole new spin on the rest of the book. So that's why I wanted to reread it, because it's so good. It's so interesting. I love the different things that it looks at. It calls out society, the academic society. It just does so much, and I really enjoyed this. But it is bonkers. It does make you go, what the actual hell? Like, it does. This was the start of it. It was the start of that love and realizing I really like that, and I was really into dark academia, still do enjoy it. It was that realization of, oh, I like weird dark academia, and that sets off the next couple of books. So one book that I don't actually own physically, but I definitely want to, Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas, and this is like your young adult version of Bunny in a way. We have this really prestigious elite school that will turn you into somebody of power within society, whether that's an actress or actor, or whether that is a politician or something. You are going to be somebody when you leave this school. But things are a little bit weird at this school. There are unusual things happening, and our main character kind of stumbles across it, and the ending makes you wonder, was this real? What actually happened here? And I love it. Like, I can't even go into too much because it will give spoilers and stuff, but I really enjoyed it. And again, it's a look at academic society and the kind of cult-like behavior that you can get from that, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Very unusual. A slow start, and honestly most of these books you're going to find have really like Marmite ratings on things like Goodreads and stuff, because you either really love them or you really don't, or you just read them going, well, that was a choice, and you move on. But I really enjoyed it. It was really good. But I do feel like, yeah, if you liked Bunny but you want something that's more like young adult leaning, then Catherine House is a really good one for that. Now we're going to move on to some translated weird books. I have a lot of them, but the first 2 are Dark Academia, which if you have watched my Dark Academia video, then these will come as no surprise to you, but again, equally fantastic. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is a Finnish book, Rabbitback Literature Society. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic book. Look at the annotations. Just look. Gorgeous. Absolutely stunning. I loved how unusual this book was. So we're following a main character, Ella, and she has moved back to her hometown, and she always wanted to be a part of this prestigious kind of like club within the school that was to do English and writing, and it was hosted by this famous author, and she really wanted to join into it. However, that was never allowed. Everyone in this town knows that if you were in this club, then you were going to become a prestigious writer. Ella just desperately wanted to be a part of it. And suddenly, as an adult, she gets that wish. She comes back, she's a teacher at this school, and then she gets invited to this writing club. But as she gets invited, the teacher who was running the writing club disappears, vanishes, and it literally is a poof. She vanished, and nobody knows why. Nobody knows how. Did she die? Did she not? What happened here? And Ella starts getting embroiled with everything that's going on in this club, gets to learn the rules for it and how unusual and weird those rules are. She gets to find out how just disturbing everything is, and it does question and toe the line of reality, and I really enjoy that. I love books that manipulate that line between reality and not. And this one also incorporates folklore, which I thought was so good. I enjoyed it. I tabbed so much in this book. Then we get up the annotation key. So we have the usual quotes that I love. We then had books that are changing what they say, which is something a big thing in this. But that's what we start off with, is she's an English teacher, she's written and been like, okay, you all have this assignment, and then someone brings in their assignment and she's like, look, you could have at least read the book. And they're like, I did, that's what the book said. And she's like, prove it. The student takes the book and goes, look, and she sees that the book's changed. The words in that book are wrong. And then she realizes this is not a one-off phenomenon. This is something that's been going on for a while. So that's really interesting. We then have sinister and creepy, because the atmosphere in this book was so good. And then we have the Literature Society rules and unusual things, like things that they have to do. Like, it was weird. It was really weird, and again, it gives you that cult-like vibes, which was really good. And then the last one is Dreams and Nightmares, because that plays a big part in here as well. It was just so good, so unusual. More people need to read this. If you like dark academia, give this one a try. If you like weird books, give this one a try. If you just want a creepy, atmospheric book that's got ties to Finnish folklore, give this one a try. It's so good and so underrated. So yeah, I would really, really highly recommend this one. I think it is fantastic. Well, obviously I'm going to say that about all of them because I'm enjoying all of them, but that one in particular I do think is so underrated. Another underrated dark academia that is weird is Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergei Dyshenko. These are by Ukrainian authors, that was written in Russian and then translated. This is a book I need to reread. I read this as an audiobook first, and I honestly at the time I was like, what the hell did I just read? And then it hasn't left my mind. And then I started realizing, actually, I really like weird, unusual books. So I desperately want to reread it and then get the second book that's out. I really like it. It was just so unusual. And this one takes the question of toeing the line of reality and then just kind of just jumps past it. Flies past that line, and it was so good. By the end of this book I was just like, what is going on? And I loved it. So we have our main character Sasha, and she's on holiday and she gets approached by this gentleman, this really weird gentleman, and he says to her, you have to perform these tasks or some bad things are going to happen. And she's like, yeah, whatever. And then bad things start happening, so she's like, okay, I'll do the task. Every time she completes the task, she coughs up these gold coins. So she stores them away, and then eventually this man comes back to her and goes, well, how many gold coins do you have? And so she shows him, she's like, good, you're now coming to this school. It's an elite school. She's never even heard of it before, but she goes there. It's weird. The stuff that they do is just bizarre. Now, I can't really go into too many details, mainly because I listened to this, one, a couple of years ago, so that's always going to make me a bit more hazy on the details, but two, when I'm listening to a book, I don't always take in as much detail. Why I really want to reread this one physically, because I just think, I mean, kind of intimidating because that text is absolutely tiny, but it was really, really interesting. I really liked what it was doing. I liked how unusual it was, and it really does warp reality and make you question what is reality. And I really enjoyed the audiobook version of it. Like, thinking back, knowing now my tastes, I really liked it, but I need to read it physically to really solidify that. This one I would recommend, especially if you are after, again, dark academia, weirdness, but make it really weird and really questioning reality, almost leaning towards sci-fi. It's a good book. Okay, so moving on from the dark academia weird books, we just have a mixture of weird books in general that are translated. That, yeah, honestly, most of my weird books are translated books. I love translated books that are weird. I don't know what it is, but I love it. So yeah, we'll just carry on. We have a German book, which is Perfume by Patrick Suskind. This is disturbing weird. Like, this is really disturbing. This is for the gothic people out there, the ones that want something that's horror but weird and a tale of obsession. It's is so freaking weird. Honestly, again, this is another book I need to reread and annotate this time, because I read this one before I was annotating, and this is great. It literally says on the title, The Story of a Murderer. We are following a main character who has this incredible sense of smell, and so he becomes a perfumer. And his sense of smell, honestly, is second to none. And we kind of see his life, how he becomes a perfumer, and then we see him catch this scent, which he just thinks is the best scent he has ever smelled in his life. And he's like, where is this scent? And so he follows it and comes across a dead virgin. And he's just like, beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. I must replicate this sense. And so starts a string of murders that are going on, killing virgins to try and capture this scent. And the end of this book is honestly batshit. Like, it got crazy. It was absolutely mad. Absolutely mad. We're following this man as he becomes like weird. He kind of just goes mad in his own head. He spends a lot of time in isolation. He then creates this scent and becomes like this god, and how that hubris is going to bring him down. Like, it was batshit, but it is so good. Like, it's so disturbingly good. So check your trigger warnings. But I mean, check your trigger warnings for most weird books, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, this was really disturbing. It really makes you go, why are we so obsessed? Why is the obsession there with virgins? What is going on here? Why is this a thing? But it's written in such a way that is so good and so enticing. I really loved it. It was really freaky. It's really weird. I mean, obviously it has to be on this list, but yeah, I think this is probably the most, okay, maybe not the most, definitely up there with one of the most disturbing books. I have one more disturbing book that honestly made me go when I was reading it. But yeah, this was really good, really enjoyed it, and it is that darker book, but I find it fascinating, and it just shows that obsession. And that's another thing that's quite common in books, in weird books, is obsession, whether it's obsession with a subject or something like that. In this case, it's obsession with a smell. Okay, then we have an Icelandic book, which is Swanfolk, and this was written by Kristin Ormarsdottir. Oh, I haven't been doing the translators. That's because they really need to put translators on the front cover. This one was translated by Vala Thorod's. Perfume was translated by John E. Woods. Oh, this one was on the title. That's just my fault. But this one was translated by Julia Matov Hersey. And then Rabbitback Literature Society was written by Passy, who's, I can't pronounce the surname, I butcher it. But it was translated by Lola M. Rogers. So apologies for forgetting to mention the translators. But Swanfolk. I read this one on the flight to Iceland, and I finished it up while I was in Iceland. Honestly, the best idea I've ever had. This was so good. I loved reading it on my way to Iceland. I did also annotate this one, and I had a really good time with it. This was such an unusual little book. We'll go through my annotation. We have not written them down. What? Who is she? Why? Why did we not write them down? Okay, well, let's see if I can work them out, because I did not write down my annotating key. That's an oversight. Okay, so the first one we've got is Pale Blue, and I think this was just for gorgeous descriptions, because that first paragraph, gorgeous, sumptuous descriptions of nature. It was absolutely phenomenal. We then have, oh yeah, this one was comments on like society and how constrictive it is and how restrained we have to be to fit society's rules. And then the last one, I think it was more just for quotes that I love, or questioning reality and whether we could trust our narrator. Let me check what another one is. Yes, questioning what reality is and whether we can actually trust our narrator. Okay, we worked it out. If that's slightly wrong, past person, well, that's your fault for not putting in the annotation key. I really loved it, and this is a book that does make you go at the end of this book, oh, did this really happen, or was it all in her head? Really interesting. So basically, we're following someone that is a detective, and she, on her walk one day, comes across these swanfolk, people that are half swan, half human. She starts becoming obsessed with these swanfolk, and it gets really, really weird and really unusual. The things that happen to her, the detective agency, and whether they believe her or not. All of this is really, really bizarre and unusual, and it was so good. Like, I really enjoyed this one. I just thought it was so bizarre, and it did again leave me with, did I enjoy this? Because I don't know. because it was so unusual. But then the longer you sit with it, the more I was like, oh no, this was really good. I like what it was done with it. I like how we question things. I like how you could take it in so many different ways, which I can't really talk about. It's a short book and I don't want to spoil things, but it is very unusual and it does make you question, can you trust your narrator? And towards the end of the book, it made me go, oh, are you here in this place? I enjoyed that, which again, I know is really vague and I'm sorry, but really good, really unusual, and a nice quick short book, which I really don't see many people talking about, but I thought it was very good. We then have My Husband by Maud Ventura. This is French and I forgot to write down the translator. I'm sorry, I will find it and put it here. But this is a book that is probably the least unusual out of all the books that I'm going to be talking about today. This one is more of like a thriller leaning book. We have our main character who is obsessed with her husband, but obsessed to a really weird amount. We're following this lady across 1 week and we see how she is constantly testing her husband, testing how much he loves her, and then punishing him for different things that he does. And it starts off kind of slow, but then by the end of it, honestly, the last bit of this book made me go, oh damn, I really liked that. I liked seeing this woman's mind and the way it was just kind of obsessive, controlling in this really weird way, and how it does take some things that we can worry about, such as like, oh, you know, they haven't responded to my message, or they've responded like this and they don't normally respond like that, and how that worry, but then make that like 20 times fold. It is so unusual. I liked it because it's psychologically weird. Seeing this woman's psyche and seeing how kind of deranged it actually is, but on surface level, how it seems okay, and then as you get deeper into it, you're like, oh no, this is weird, this is kind of crazy, this is obsessive. And I liked that. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, this is probably like the least weird out of this list of books, but I still wanted to mention it here because I just thought it was a really good book, really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed that look at the psyche and how easily obsession can become toxic and cause these very weird behaviors. But I thought it was very good, very interesting, and not as weird as the others, but I do think it was a good book regardless. That was a little bit weird. Continuing on with French books though, we have I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, and this was translated by Ros Schwartz. This is a book I've read very recently. I'll be talking about it again soon in my monthly wrap up. But this was really weird, really unusual. I picked this one up because of, well, quite a few people, but Leah being one and Jennifer being another. I'll have both their channels linked below. This is kind of like a sci-fi dystopian book. We are following a main character who has no name. She has grown up in this, what they presume is an underground bunker. They don't actually know because there's no windows, there's no way to tell where they actually are. But she has grown up in this bunker with these women who all had lives before coming here, but can't remember coming here. They know that something bad happened, but they cannot remember the events or what's caused it, why they're here, nothing. They can't remember. But they are all trapped inside this one room and they are constantly watched by these 3 security guards. They rotate, but there's always 3. They're always men and they never talk to them. But they are controlled in what they can do, what they can wear, how they can act. They're not allowed to touch each other. It's very unusual. And then one day they're able to escape. And the thing about this book is you never know why this happened. You never know where they are. You don't know whether it's on Earth or a different planet. You don't know what happened to cause this. Like, you get no answers. But it's such an interesting book and it was so well done, and it really questions what is humanity when you strip it away and you take away everything. What is humanity? What makes us different? And I really liked that. I liked the questions, and I mentioned in my vlog how you could take this book in so many different ways, and I think depending on where you are when you read this, you will get different things from it. I didn't annotate it at the time, but I definitely want to. This is done as almost like stream of consciousness. There is no chapters at all. This is our main character writing down her experience and leaving it for someone to hopefully find, but she has no idea. Really, really interesting and such a unique look at things, and one that is going to stay with me for a really long time. Like, I really enjoyed this one. It's a short book, so it's not going to take you long to read. It was just so unusual. There are things about this book which kind of made me think of the next book which we're going to be talking about, just in terms of the fact fact that we have this narrator, we have no idea what their name is. They're writing this all down in like this journal letter entry format, which they're leaving for somebody else to read. They have no idea what's going on, why they're here, what's actually real. They have no idea, which does leave me very well onto Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. And this is a very unusual, weird sci-fi book, which gave me, when I was reading I Who Have Never Known Men, I kind of suddenly had that epiphany moment where I'm like, oh, this reminds me of Annihilation in some ways. In a lot of ways it doesn't, but in some ways where we have a main character whose name we do not know, they're keeping it in a journal entry, you don't know what's actually going on in this place, you don't really know anything about it, you can't trust anything we have been told. So yes, you get more answers in a way as to where we are and what's gone on, but you don't even know if you can trust that, which I really like. But what makes this one stand on its own is just the weird uniqueness of this. It is more plant bio matter that is the weirdness of this. We are in this area called Area X. We are following this lady who is a part of this mission going into Area X. I think they are the 12th expedition into this unknown, and all the other parties prior have ended up coming to very weird, unusual ends. Some of them has been mass suicide. Some of them have been a full-on gun shootout with one another. Like, there's been really weird, unusual things, and as we go there, we are finding about this place that is just even more weird and unusual, and we realise they've not been told much. They have been brought in with the wrong kind of preconceptions of this place. They have not been given all the information, and at the same time, can you trust our narrator? Can you trust what she is writing? This also goes back in time as well and looks at our narrator's past and everything. This was so unusual and I had so much fun rereading it. I reread this one very recently, I think it was in June, and it was just so good and bizarre. Again, this is one that I had listened to on audiobook a few years ago, and I remember it was like Vita Nostra, where I'm like, I liked this, but I need to read it physically with my eyeballs to be able to know for sure. And I love this one so much, I really want to continue, and I actually do have, or I can access the second and third book through my Libby app, so I'm very excited to eventually continue on with these because I just thought it was really good. Loads of questions that are left, done in a really interesting way, and I liked the fact that this was all biomatter and things transforming in different ways and not really knowing what's causing all of this. Like, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was just so unique and different, and I hadn't read anything quite like it until of course I made those comparisons with I Who Have Never Known Men. Again, very actual different stories, different plot lines, completely different in that respect, but just kind of similar crossover in some aspect. Okay, so then we have what order do I want to do this one in? Yeah, okay, we're going to talk about this one first. So we have the Lovecraft Compendium by H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft is a classic author, classic sci-fi horror author, and oh my god were these weird. And it did kind of, again, Annihilation gives me Lovecraftian vibes. The next book I'm going to talk about gives me Lovecraft vibes. I feel like Lovecraft has been a very influential author on the weird genre, especially weird sci-fi horror. This was just really good. I really enjoyed it. Honestly, something that I went into thinking I'm not going to really enjoy because I didn't think it was my kind of thing, and then I loved it. I adored it. This is like the author that did The Call of Cthulhu and all of that weirdness. So I do think if you like weird books and you haven't read Lovecraft, you should give him a try because it's definitely been influential even on today's writings, and I am a massive advocate of reading the books that have inspired our current authors. I love doing that. I think you can get so much from them and so much respect from the authors that have had a massive influence in still today's genres. Like, I really enjoy that. That's my shout out for that. I'm not going to talk too much on it because Lovecraft is, well, he's a classic author, very well known. But yeah, if you do like your weird, unusual, especially sci-fi horror leaning book, give them a try. Very good. But a book that really reminded me of Lovecraft is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This is not a book I own, but is a book I desperately want to own because it was so good. So we are following a character whose wife has come home to her after going off on this mission under the sea. They were exploring some trench, but she's come back really weird. It's a book that explores grief and loss and losing someone even though they're still there. It was so bizarre. I loved it because you do get two perspectives. The second perspective is of her wife who went under the sea, and you're seeing what happened there, and it's got that creeping dread horror elements that Lovecraft has. That's why I mentioned it. If you like Lovecraft, read Julia Armfield. If you like Julia Armfield, read Lovecraft. It works. They go hand in hand. It really gave me Lovecraftian vibes from this book, and I thought it was really, really good. I really enjoyed this book. It is definitely one I want physically for my shelves. I would reread this one. I think it is such an interesting depiction of grief and loss, but then mixing it with that Lovecraftian sci-fi horror lean in. Another short story by Julia Armfield, which I did own physically, and I've been talking about this a lot lately, and then I unhauled because I loved one particular short story in particular in this collection. That was a really weird sentence, but it's the collection of Salt Slow, and I did own this collection, but I didn't love all of the short stories. The one I loved was the first one, which is Mantis, and I was like, there's no point keeping a whole short story collection for one short story, and I've regretted that because I've read a lot of books that make me think about it. I also think about this short story a lot. Mantis is basically about puberty. We're following this girl who's going through puberty and growing up, transforming at the exact same time. And I'm not going to say more than that because it is a tiny short story, but it was so good and so visceral. The body horror was just, amazing. I thought it was so good, which moves me really nicely on to the other book which I read recently, and that is Chlorine by Jade Song. And the reason why I say it moves me on is because when I was reading Chlorine, I was like, oh, this reminds me of Mantis, but make it into an actual novel. Really good book. Again, this is one that I annotated, so if you can see those annotated, but there's loads of them. This was also a gift by Uniquely DJ, so thank you for that. But we have quotes that I love, mermaid folklore, because this is a mermaid horror book. We have comments on society, unsettling and horrific elements, and I did also have another tab of casual racism because our main character, she is Chinese American, and she is someone that is obsessed with mermaids and wants to become a mermaid. This is a horror mermaid book, which is a subgenre I need more of, but I really enjoyed this. It was so good. It was really, again, a story of going through puberty, going through adolescence, the changes that your body is going through and how kind of messy and gross that can be, but add in mermaids, and it was so good. And this is the book that made me go ugh, literally physically react while I was reading this. Like, it literally, I was literally going, no, don't do it, and then I was like, oh god, it was brilliant. It was so good. A book that is going to stay with me a lot. Like, I recently went to a book launch for Katie's book. I'll have her channel linked below. Her books are not fitting in this category at all, but while I was there, I kept bringing this book up. I don't know how, but we kept getting onto loads of different discussions. One of them was how when you're going to a hospital, things like this, how women are treated differently to men. And that was a discussion that was being brought up, and about periods and things. And I brought up this book and I was like, oh, this connects really well to a book I recently read. And I just kept bringing this book up, like every chance. Like, someone else there had read Salt Slow and I was like, oh, you know Mantis? Chlorine is like I just kept bringing it up. This is clearly a book that has stayed with me. It is a book I keep thinking about. And when I first read it, I did say that my criticism was that there was about 50 to 60 pages of this that was really slow. But at the same time, those are the bits that I keep talking about when I'm talking to others as well. So it's just good. It's a fantastic book. It's going to be in my top 10 of the year. I think it was so interesting and so well written, and I cannot believe that this is a debut. I definitely want to read more of whatever Jade Song puts out. This is fantastic. So we are following Ren Yu, and she is a swimmer. She is becoming, or attempting to become, a professional swimmer, and you see this very toxic relationship between her and her instructor, that toxic relationship, how difficult it is to become a professional athlete, the things that you put your body through to try and achieve it, and while going through adolescence and dealing with all of these changes within your body. And it's just really unusual. There are so many trigger warnings. There is actually a list at the start of the book, so do check them before you go into it, but then you tie that all in with mermaid folklore, and I thought it was really good. Okay, and then we just have some other random weird books that I have read. So we'll do the last couple of ebooks, I think. So we've got Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. This is a book I have unhauled. It wasn't really for me, but it is a weird book, and it is more on that literary fiction weird. So this one, we're following a main character who is a photographer, and she gets invited to have her own gallery, her own private show, and she ends up going down this weird spiral. You have obsession over friendship, you have the fact that our main character is so horrible, and she's meant to be, you're not meant to like her, and then you get all the twisted weird things that she is doing to men because she photographs men. It's really weird. It's definitely a book that is supporting women's wrongs. But yeah, that's all I can really say on it. It wasn't one that I loved, but it is a weird book and I did want to mention it here. We then have The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. This is a tiny little short story that I have not stopped thinking about. Again, it's one that I had in Little Short Story Collection, decided to unhaul because I'm like, oh, I'm probably never going to read this again. And while I probably wouldn't, I still think it would have been a good one to have for videos like this because it was just so unusual. It was a tiny short story, commented on society, and it got really weird. Honestly, it was just really disturbing, and I can't talk too much about it because it's a tiny little short story. I then have The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugene Eads. This is a really good book. I really love this. I think about this book a lot. This is one that I annotated but didn't tab. This is before I started tabbing. I've like folded pages at the bottom. I went through a whole annotating journey. But this one is weird just because of the way it's written. So we have this family. There's a very strict religious family. As a result, is very strict on their girls, and we have these boys that are obsessed with these girls, and then the girls start committing suicides. It's just really unusual. You see the boys' obsession and fascination, and they've created this museum, and this book is written as if you are visiting this museum and you are seeing the little snippets of things that they have kept of these girls, and you're listening to their story of these girls' life, and it's so unusual in the way that it was done. Again, this is another book that I really want to reread, and I think this line on the back sums it up really nicely. We have, that girl didn't want to die. She just wanted out of that house. She wanted out of that decorating scheme. And so we're seeing these 5 sisters through the lenses of these boys who were enamored with them. It was really interesting, really unusual, and one that has just kind of stuck with me, and one I definitely want to reread. And I do want to read more of Jeffrey Eugene's work just to see if it carries that same writing style that I really liked. Again, this is a bit like My Husband's. It's not quite as weird as everything else. It's more in the writing of this and how it was done that makes it a bit more unique and unusual, but I still wanted to mention it. I'd been on the fence about whether I wanted to mention it or not, and just before filming this video I decided, yeah, I want to mention it. Plus, I just love showing off this book. I love this cover so much. We then have Orlando by Virginia Woolf, and this is really unusual, but I really enjoyed this. This is an unusual book that looks at gender roles and kind of questions them. It's also a bit magical realism leaning. Some parts of this book you're like, wait, what? We now have like magical fairy beings involved? Like, what? It is a book that is just kind of calling out society and our expectations of gender and the gender roles within society. This takes place over centuries as well, yet we're still following the same main characters. What I mean, like, it's slightly magical realism leaning, but again, this is one that I have really enjoyed. So we're following first our main character, who is this young man, Orlando, who is beautiful and seems to belong everywhere and nowhere, but then one morning he awakens transformed and transported into the 18th century and the body of a woman. And then we see Orlando as it kind of flits between man and woman, deciding on the day what they want to be, the difficulties that come with being a woman during this society, and the privilege of being a man. And it was very interesting call out on those gender roles, which I really enjoyed. Okay, that's it for all the ones that I have read. Now let's go through a couple that are on my TBR. This bit will be quicker, I promise. I've just got a handful of books that are on my TBR that I think are going to hit that really weird kind of unusual weird books for weird people. So let's start off with It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over. This is by Andy Marken. This is a book I picked up recently, again because of Leah, and this is one I'm really intrigued in. I did want to have read it before this video, but I just never managed to fit it in time. You'll be seeing this in a book haul video coming out in August, I think is when I'm doing the book haul video. This is meant to be a really strange little book following someone who has died and they're kind of like a zombie. It seems interesting. We then have The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, who is meant to be a particularly unusual writer. I have read one of their books before, which is it The Clockwork? The Magic Toy Shop, and it was okay. I'm hoping I prefer this because this is weird, dark fairy tale retellings, and I think that is going to be more my style. The writing in The Magic Toy Shop was good, but I just wasn't there for the story. But I do think having it be darker fairy tales and making them really weird, considering that honestly fairy tales are particularly dark and weird already, it will be very interesting to see what happens. We then have another new book that I picked up recently, that is Lost in the Garden by Adam S. Leslie. This is a book I picked up because of Willow, and she was talking about it and said it was a very weird horror leaning book, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna give this a try. Plus I loved the cover and I was thinking about getting it anyway. And then Willow did a video on it and I was like, okay, well now I have to get it. I would like to read this one in September is my plans for this, and I don't really know too much about it apart from the fact that we're not allowed to go to Almondby, except we now have 3 main characters who are going to go there and they're going to find some weird horror stuff as they go. We then have Orpheus Builds a Girl by Heather Parry. I think this is the one that I also picked up because of Willow. This is more of a Frankenstein inspired book, but again one that's kind of like a weird horror leaning. I don't know too much about this one, I just know it has been really enjoyed. Recently Kat from the Fairy Librarian read this one as well and was talking about it in Discord, so again a book I would like to get to soon. I don't really know anything about this except it is based on a true story of delusion and toxic obsession, and like I've been mentioning in a lot of weird books, you do have a lot of, well, delusion and toxic obsession within those books. And then the last one is Julia Armfield's newest book, which, as I already mentioned, Julia Armfield is just a weird author that does great weird books that I'm interested in reading more of. So Julia Armfield's latest release, which is Private Right, and I think this one is going to be another story on grief and loss and horror leaning, but I'm very excited to give it a read. So yeah, those are a few just off my TBR that I would like to read soon. If you have any other weird books that I haven't mentioned that you really enjoyed or that you're keeping your eye on, then put those in the comments below. I do really enjoy my weird books. I just think they're so interesting. They're not books I want to read all the time, but they are books that just don't leave my mind. I think because they are so weird, it does just constantly make you think about them, and I love a book that can do that. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. For my lovely weird people out there, if you're like me and you like weird books, I hope you have enjoyed it. And even if you don't like weird books, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Maybe it's given you something to think about in terms of books that you'd be interested in. I don't know, but thank you so much for watching. I think if you made it this far, then what emoji do we put? I'm trying to think, what's a weird emoji? I don't know. I'll leave that to you. You can always find a weird emoji if you just don't know what you'd like to comment, but you want to show that you are here, you can do that. But I hope you are all doing amazingly well, and thank you so much for watching. Like, genuinely, I appreciate each and every single one of you that watches these videos, whether you comment or not, and you're just a silent watcher. I really genuinely appreciate it, so thank you so much. But I am going to go, so if you have enjoyed this video, then please consider giving it that thumbs up, subscribe and comment. Those 3 things really do help this channel out. My social media links, everyone I've mentioned, will be linked below for you, and I will of course catch you in the very next video.